I should like to tell you of three 18-year-old boys. In 1856, more than 1,000 of our people, some of them perhaps your forebears, found themselves in serious trouble while crossing the plains to this valley. Because of a series of unfortunate circumstances, they were late in getting started. They ran into snow and bitter cold in the highlands of Wyoming. Their situation was desperate, with deaths occurring every day. President Young learned of their condition as the October General Conference was about to begin. He immediately called for teams, wagons, drivers, and supplies to leave to rescue the bereft saints. When the first rescue team reached the Martin Company, there were too few wagons to carry the suffering people. The rescuers had to insist that the carts keep moving. When they reached the Sweetwater River on November 3rd, chunks of ice were floating in the freezing water. After all these people had been through and in their weakened condition, that river seemed impossible to cross. It looked like stepping into death itself to move into the freezing stream. Men who had once been strong sat on the frozen ground and wept, as did the women and children. Many simply could not face that ordeal. Now I quote from the record. Three 18-year-old boys belonging to the relief party came to the rescue. To the astonishment of all who saw, they carried nearly every member of the ill-fated handcart company across the snowbound stream. The strain was so terrible and the exposure so great that in later years all the boys died from the effects of it. When President Brigham Young heard of this heroic act, he wept like a child, and later declared publicly that act alone will ensure C. Allen Huntington, George W. Grant, and David P. Kimball an everlasting salvation in the celestial kingdom of God, worlds without end. Now, Marquis, these boys were 18 years of age at the time, and because of the program then in effect, were likely holders of the Aaronic priesthood. Great was their heroism, sacred the sacrifice they made of health and eventually of life itself to save the lives of those they assisted.
Henry McBride, 13 years old, traveled to the Salt Lake Valley in the Martin Hand Company in 1856 with his parents, Robert and Margaret, and 4 brothers and sisters. That evening, as we crossed the Platte River for the last time, it was very cold. The next morning, there was about 6 inches of snow on the ground. Then what we had to suffer can never be told. Father was very bad and could hardly sit up in the tent. I managed to get Father in one of the wagons. That was the last we ever saw of him alive. That evening the snow was getting very deep, and my sister and I had to pitch our tent and get some wood. There were plenty of dry willows to be gathered. After we had made Mother as comfortable as possible, we went to find Father. But the wind was blowing the snow so hard we could not see anything. We did not find him that night. The next morning the snow was about 18 inches deep and awful cold. While my sister was preparing our little bite of breakfast, I went to look for Father and found him under the wagon with snow all over him, and he was stiff and dead. I felt as though my heart was burst as I sat down beside him in the snow and took his hand in mine and cried, "Oh, Father, Father." There we were, away from everything, away out on the plains with hardly anything to eat or wear, and Father dead and Mother sick. A widow with 5 children and hardly able to live from day to day. After I had my cry out, I went back to the tent and told Mother and the children. To try to write my feelings is out of the question. We were not the only family called upon to mourn the loss of a father that morning, for there were 13 men dead in camp. The men that were able to do anything cleared off the snow and made a fire and thawed the ground and dug a hole and buried all in one grave. I can assure you that the men had no heart to do more than they had to do. And should we die before our journey's through, happy day, all is well. We then are free from toil and sorrow too. With the just we shall dwell. And if our lives are spared again, to see the saints their rest obtain, oh, how we'll make this chorus swell. All is well, all is well. What a wonderful people they were. There is nothing like their great effort in all of history.
be true to that great inheritance, true to the faith that our parents have cherished, true to the truth for which martyrs have perished, to God's command, soul, heart, and hand, faithful and true we will ever stand.